Welcome back to Building. You're about to listen to an episode that we recorded with Joanne Bell, the founder and managing director of Bell's Accountants. In this episode, you're going to learn about the importance of cultivating a network, as you never know when opportunity is going to show itself, through to how to scale a business through acquisition. Today, Joanne talks about how she essentially accidentally started her accountancy firm, going from client to client collecting receipts, to where she is now with over 30 staff members, upwards of £2 million in turnover, and seeing through a number of successful business acquisitions. We hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please like, share, and subscribe. And that's it. Onto the pod.
My name's Jo Bell. I've been running an accountancy practice called Bell's Accountants for 15 years now. It started out just me in my little washing machine car. I think it was a 1 litre Toyota Aygo for anyone that's interested. And I was driving around collecting bags of receipts from taxi drivers, builders, gardeners, anyone that had to submit a self-assessment, basically. And at the time, I definitely didn't think of myself as a business person. I saw this as private work. So it was very much a side hustle alongside my employment. And the main reason that I started really was through debt. So I was always very independent, wanted to move out. So I moved into a flat young at 19. And this was 2007, right at the peak of the housing market, where the mortgage companies were signing off 105% mortgages based on your self-cert that you could definitely afford it, we promise. And then I very quickly realised that I had more going out than I had coming in with the mortgage and credit cards and things like that. So I decided to start doing some private work to kind of bring that income in. The plan was to sell the flat very shortly afterwards. I was going to do it up, so I spent a lot of money to do it up. And then, of course, the housing crash in 2008, the market fell through the floor, so I ended up in negative equity. There was no real option to increase my earnings via my job. They wanted a salary sacrifice for me to do further training and things like that. So I realised pretty quickly that it was kind of on me if I was going to dig myself out of this situation. And really, the only advertising I did was in a little local trade magazine, just a little advert to say, do your tax return cheap. And people told people, and that's the brilliant thing, if you do a good job. And I made sure I told everyone what they could claim for, and because of that, people told their friends, there's a girl in Blackfen, she'll do your tax return, and it really went from there. And now we are 36 staff strong, I think, across 5 sites, about 2 million in turnover. We have grown majority organically. I'm very, very grateful for the recommendations, and always will be, that clients are kind enough to tell people about us. But we've also done some acquisitions, which is always quite interesting to people. And I like to talk about that on these kind of shows, because it is a really good way to rapidly grow your business if you haven't considered that as an option before, to buy a business to bolt on. And that can be something that maybe it provides a complementary service to yours. So in accountancy, that might be mortgage brokering, financial advice, things like that, or it could be a competitor. If you buy the business of someone who's retiring, obviously you potentially double your client base overnight. And what's great as well is we've got some really good talent because of that. Buying businesses, you bring those people in as well. You bring clients that might not necessarily have chosen to work with you, but that's sort of good learnings for both sides. And although we do obviously go in and systematise and standardise and digitalise as standard, we do also learn from the businesses that we buy. They have sometimes systems that are better than ours. So they have maybe a better onboarding system or a better tech stack. And so we're constantly learning about the way other people do things, which is, I think, really, really important in business, because you can get stuck in doing things the same way because that's how you've always done it.
Yeah. So that's been like 3 minutes and like so much, right? Like, I think like it's easy to just like, you probably get so used to doing those intros that you don't even think about like everything that you've said there, right? From the start through to scaling through acquisitions and like learning like onboarding processes and things like that. So as we said when we started, we don't really have a script for today, but I think we can probably break it down into pillars there. So like, let's start with the early days, then move into like the scaling phase, and then I'd love to ask some questions on acquisitions, because like that is something that has been on the front of our mind quite recently, Brennan. So if we can selfishly maybe learn a few things as well as get some content. So I think you quite flippantly at the start said, yeah, like started this because of debt. Like I had a 105% mortgage, and like I realized that I had more money going out than coming in. And then yeah, it was kind of okay. I imagine at the time it wasn't. So talk to us about the early days and the drivers then.
Yeah, really good question. I think at the time, like people say to me, oh, I don't know how you did what you did, but I think when you're young, you're talking sort of early 20s. I
Mm,
really had nothing to lose apart from the flat, and I'd only just got that anyway. So it was one of those, my car was leased, and so it didn't scare me as much as maybe it could. I mean, I've got a little daughter now, and my attitude to risk has definitely changed.
mm,
And I do the acquisitions in a much more calculated way, in the sense of, I won't personal guarantee it, and I'll do it through separate holdings vehicles. And whereas at the time I kind of didn't know all of that, so I was just really just doing my best to sort of survive. So it was hard, but very quickly I realized, how easy it was to make money in my industry. And I think with accountancy, we are very lucky. I always feel for people that are in a type of business that have to look for the next sale, they don't know what they're going to earn next month or the month after that. Whereas in accountancy, once you've got a client, if you look after that client, you've got recurring revenue. So they're going to pay you, every month, every year. So there's a lot of reassurance in that, in terms of forecasting,
mm,
what that looks like. But yeah, I mean, definitely it was hard to kind of claw my way out of that debt situation. And it's one of the reasons that I'm really passionate now about financial education for people,
mm.
particularly young people. I'm a governor at local college, and I do a lot of work with students because I want people to know about household budgeting and understand credit cards and how it works and how they allocate your payments against the lowest interest bearing thing. And so I like to think of myself as the female Martin Lewis on a much, much smaller scale. I've never been on telly, unfortunately, but I do try and do my best to kind of share what I've learned just from my own experience.
Yeah, I mean, makes a lot of sense, and I'd say yeah, probably a shared passion. Like I and Brennan, I think you and I have seen this a lot since we've started our journey, as to like how big people's gaps are in some very basic areas, like you said, of household budgeting and things like that, and how it can quickly scale to get you into some bad places. So yeah, I'd be keen to understand a bit more of the work you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of people, I mean, almost everyone I know, to be honest, is self-taught when it comes
Mm,
to financial education. There's very sort of little out there, and whether it's a generational thing with our parents, but people didn't really talk about it. How much money they earned, what money they spent, what their savings looked like, whether they had a pension. So it's something I talk very openly about with my child, and obviously the kids that I work with as well, and sort of explain to them what it looks like and how compound interest works and why you should have savings, because it feels like the world is sort of designed to get people into debt, even maybe worse now even than when it happened
mm,
to me those years ago. Because as soon as they turn 18, it's like, oh, here's a credit card and student debt and all this sort of stuff, and it can really quickly get overwhelmed. Even the buy now pay later, when you go on Amazon and buy stuff, and
yeah, yeah.
then there's the option, and you think, but if you can't afford it now and your income's not due to increase, how are you going to afford it the month after that? So it's trying to sort of help people to see that this is the money that you've got spare for disposable income, and that's it, kind of thing. And even with that, you've got to be sensible, because you've got to put some away, because things are always going to happen. Your car's going to break down. You're gonna need some insurance for something or other. There's just always something that comes up, isn't there?
Yeah,
I,
I'm looking at Brennan as you say that, because Brennan, this
yeah.
might give you an opportunity to rant about your roof if you want to take it.
No, I'm not. I'm not doing that. But obviously, when setting up a new business as well, and giving yourself a runway of like 6 to 9 months to survive, basically, and little things like that you don't budget for, they just happen. It's terrifying. But again, it also shows, once you've gone through the process and come out the back end of it, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't need all that money that I had before. Like, how have I managed to do it? It's kind of strange. What I was going to ask you, Joe, was obviously self-taught and personal finance and all of that. Were there particular sources that you used to teach yourself? Was it kind of textbooks? Was it courses? Or was it just kind of going online and just reading and just kind of gradually getting through all that information?
Yeah, good question, Brenda. To be honest, most of my learnings came from my mistakes, and it's kind of something that I then want to help other people, because I had to learn to understand how I was gonna get out of this situation, and even my knowledge. I remember the mortgage broker asking me, how much do you need to live every month? And I think my answer was about 50 quid, because at the time all I needed was chocolate and credit on my phone. That was what I needed. So I just didn't understand what council tax, water, utility bills and all of that. And obviously once you get a house, you see that. But also I've surrounded myself with good people. I think networking is a hugely powerful thing in business. There's lots of people, lending brokers, for example, debt charities, people that will help with things like that and provide literature and resource. So yeah, definitely the main thing was kind of experience, but then also the resources, which are getting more and more prevalent. I think there's more and more out there. I had to do a lot of specific research because I was asked to write a children's book, which was a really interesting project. I only did 2 chapters because there was a financial advisor that did some and a bank manager, but my chapter was about basically money, business, taxes, for children between the ages of 8 to 12. So it was really challenging because it's making quite a complex concept simple, trying to explain it to children. And so I was using examples like washing cars, and how much money you might make from that. And that's how lots of people start their businesses, isn't it? It's something that they can do to earn money. They ask friends and family if they can do things for them, and then slowly you build your network that way.
Yeah, so sorry, Harry, I'll get back to letting you ask the questions in a minute, but it strikes me, what is it, like a 16, 17-year journey from 2007 when you kind of first started doing this on the side for friends and family. At that point, did you ever envisage that your business would be as big as it is now? Or was it just something that you were doing on the side to earn that cash in the moment? As in, were you living in the moment, or did you have those long-term kind of goals and plans as well?
Definitely living in the moment, 100%. I had no ambitions. I did not come from an entrepreneurial family at all. My nan and granddad were council estate. They predominantly raised me. And I often think they passed away shortly after I got that flat. And people say to me now, oh, your grandparents would be so proud of you. And I think my granddad specifically would have been horrified about me going into business. He didn't even like when I left my first job. He didn't understand, because he was just like, but you've got a job. Why would you need another job? That generation, you stayed in a job for life. He just couldn't get his head around it. So obviously now I've come out the other side and I'm all right again. But I think at the time, sort of taking risks, leaving employment and joining self-employment, he definitely wouldn't have been up for that at the time, just in a way of trying to protect me, But yeah, and it's one of the things I say to people as well is I think to some extent it's a strength and to some extent it's a weakness, but I've never actually worked for a company of the size I run, so I don't actually know what it looks like. I'm not from a corporate background, so to some extent that's a benefit because there's this free, I don't have prefixed ideas of what the hierarchy should look like or, how things should work. But then the downside is I don't really know what an ops manager does or a HR. So I'm still in that business space where I'm doing everything. And I mean, I've got practice managers in all the offices, so they handle all the day-to-day. But in terms of managing the business as a whole, that's kind of all me. I do the finance, I do the HR, I do the marketing, and yeah, but I love it. So it's, until I don't, I suppose, or until it does get too big for me to manage and I need specific people in specific roles, and then I'll probably need a different level of support. So it'll come back to that network again, executive coaching, people that do have experience in those larger entities that can help me to know what I need.
Yeah, it's nice to know you had that similar response. So when I told my nan that I was leaving my last agency to start 1225, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, do you really want all that stress?" I was like, so I get it. I totally get it. I totally get that response. A question that I'd quite like to ask, probably leading on from the question that you asked, Brendan, was, you kind of said that accidentally started a business, really. Like, you were doing this for the extra cash, and then at some point you realized you had a business. Like, when did you realize? Like, was it just a moment when you sat down like, oh crap, like this could be a thing now?
No, I don't think I ever would have realised on my own. I think I still would have been there, dealing with all the clients myself and never going on holiday. And yeah, it would have been a real challenge. No, it was meeting a business coach. So again, I did a bit of networking just in local, 4N, breakfast groups and things. And I met a business coach who asked what your biggest challenge is. And at the time, for me, it was two things. I'd hit the VAT threshold, and I was really worried about how this was going to impact. Most of my clients were really small, self-employed businesses who weren't VAT registered. So I was thinking, right, I'm going to have to add 20% to my fee. You know, I'm going to lose half my clients. And the other challenge I had was just general sort of organisation of people's records, because everything was paper then. There wasn't really any sort of decks or all these great HubDoc and all these great apps you can use to store your receipts. So people, I'd have to collect, you know, bags of stuff. So it was falling out my boot, out my wardrobe. You know, I'm thinking I've got to get this back to people. You know, I was running around delivering stuff, because there's a risk factor there as well of people knowing where you live. You know, if you're saying to people, drop it off to me, you know, and they don't like their tax bill or something. So I was quite conscious of collecting delivery, which is great for them, you know, getting a collection delivery service as well, but not great for me. And she helped me put together this really positive letter to the clients to say, you know, thanks to you and your support, my business has grown. And for that reason, I'm going to have to register for VAT. And it's not a price increase. It's just something we have to do for the HMRC. And of course, not one person batted an eyelid, because I was probably half what I should be charging anyway. And they were probably just waiting for me to increase the price. But I think that's another sort of big tip that I give to business owners who I speak to, that just don't underestimate your worth in those early years. Because I think where we're small and we're new, we think, oh, we can't charge as much as, you know, bigger agencies or bigger firms or whatever. And actually, they probably get a better service for you then than they ever will in the larger stages of your business, because it's so personal. You know, the likelihood is they'll have your mobile number, you'll be going massively above and beyond because they're such an important client to you in those early days. It's not that they become less important, but the service is diluted. You know, when you have other team members, there has to be other people involved in the job. You're likely to sort of start closing at 5 o'clock and you're not giving out your mobile number and stuff like that. So charge what you're worth in those early days and you'll just get there a lot quicker. But she was really instrumental, and she helped me to get an office as well, like a little service office in a local sort of what would be now co-working. It wasn't called that at the time. It was a service office. And that was just so time-saving, because then people were bringing things to me. I had a meeting room, so you just felt like you had that little bit more professionalism about it. And I think after that, really, the sky was the limit. And she was a person that had done what I wanted to do. So she grew a company in the railway industry from 0 to 300 people. And I always think, if you're going to get a mentor, like get someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be your industry. And actually it's sometimes interesting to get a different perspective, because sometimes people in your industries, they give you some very specific sort of technical, very directive advice, which is great. But people in other industries have different skills. But so long as they've been on that journey, you know, they've grown a business and they've exited, if that's what you want to do, then they'd be a really good person to seek advice from.
And how did you adapt, right? So like you went from essentially working out of your car to then building up, realizing with the help of a mentor, okay, this is a thing, we have a business here, moving into an office space. And I guess the time that eventually then came for you to start hiring people. How did you find that shift from, I guess, like just being you and doing everything to then having another person and then a few more people?
I found it, I was relieved, to be honest, because the curse of accountancy is that it is absolutely relentless with deadlines. You know, everything is a deadline: payroll, VAT, limited company year ends, self-assessment year ends, and it's like Groundhog Day. Once you finish, it goes again. You know, you just keep going. So I very quickly found, once I got to a certain level, that I couldn't go on holiday. You know, clients always needed something, be it a mortgage application, you know, assistance with that, or they're going for some lending at the bank, and it was really, really sort of hard work. And I think my expertise was always probably sales and people. You know, I loved the prospects. I loved speaking to the prospects about their business. I loved understanding what they did, how they made money. And obviously all that's helped sort of contribute to my knowledge as well. And my first employee was someone that I'd worked with before. She'd actually managed me. So I had complete faith in her technical abilities. That just wasn't a concern for me. So as soon as she started, it was like, there you go, thanks very much. And then off I went and carried on the networking and went from there. And there's nothing like, I think, the drive of knowing that you're responsible for that person's salary. You know, you've got to make those bills at the end of the month. It makes you hungry. And so, yeah, it was really from that point, I think it was inevitable that I was just going to keep growing. because then she gets at full capacity and you think, right, what do we do now? And, you have a choice to kind of level out, I suppose, but I've never taken that option. I've always just sort of kept going.
Yeah. Brendan and I probably looked at each other and smiled then. That's how we met. So Brendan was my first ever boss at my first job. We've been together for like 12 years now. I've known him longer than most people in my life. So yeah, but that's why we're both smiling as you said that. Brendan, I'd like you coming in for a question.
I suppose with the journey, kind of these milestones, you'd never done any of these kind of steps before. You were learning as you were kind of going on. What was your approach? Would you go away and get information from people that had done it beforehand all the time? Or would you very much like, I'll try it, let's see what happens? Because it feels like your journey so far has been very much like, I want to do this, I'm going to go away and do it. But actually, was it a lot more kind of thoughtful and kind of planned out?
No, unfortunately not, Brendan. Nowadays, I think I've learned the benefit of consultation and patience and thinking about things a little bit more. But definitely in the beginning, I was feet first. It was very instinctive. Yeah, this is what I need to do. And I made mistakes like we all do, really. I think the one thing that I wish I'd have done a bit differently is if I'd have from the beginning had the end in mind. Even now, I just suppose I don't really have the end in mind, but in terms of knowing that it was going to grow to a certain size, I probably wouldn't have wasted as much time just like plugging holes, because it was, so for example, the system that you choose, whether it be your CRM, or we have a specific system for accountancy that's integrated so we can do everything through it now. But at the beginning, we went through transition that was what we needed at the time. Whereas if we'd have just bitten the bullet, we wouldn't have had to reinvent the wheel so many times. So started off doing everything on Excel. Then we had like a smaller, like cheap system that was X amount per month. And then we had like a number of systems to do different things that didn't really talk to each other very well. And it's because I'd never really envisioned that it would ever get to the size that it was. So the solution then wasn't fit for purpose as we grew. And, I think if I'd planned that out a little bit better, I probably spent quite a lot of money and time, doing things again as we grew, and then going, right, and maybe that's just, natural part of progression of the growth of the business. But I think now, technology is available relatively affordably from the beginning. So, it'd be good to kind of envision your business a lot bigger than it is and make those decisions early on as to what your process is going to look like. Because actually, as you get bigger, it's then harder to change. It's that whole like redirecting a big ship, isn't it? Much easier when you're a little boat to nail everything down and go, yeah, this is really a smooth way to do things. And obviously it will change, but not to that extent.
Yeah, so one of the things that we found as we were scaling the previous place was it's easy to fall into the mindset as well of like, either we'll worry about this when we're bigger, or like you have a specific problem, you think, actually, this will get easier as we get more people on board. And like, I know from our experience, like that was never the case.
No, it's harder, isn't it? It's because then you've got change management, you've got to help the people change as well. And you've got more data that's got to be transferred onto a different system and, more things that it impacts. And I mean, now, as I say, that's part of the reason that it slowed me down, really, because I've realised I've got to consult with loads of different sort of heads of department, and not because I have to. Obviously, I'm the sole director, so I could just go, this is what we're doing. But I think that's a mistake, because you don't know how the decisions you make impact the productivity of that particular department, or you don't know their resource at that time, their capacity, how busy they are. So unless you say, look, we're looking at this particular IT project or this particular marketing campaign, when might be a good time to do it? When might you be able to, give it your full attention? And when it's just you, it's easy. You've only got to manage your own diary, really. You haven't got all those resource issues to worry about.
Sorry, Harry. Lots of questions every time you speak. So you've said it there, sole director. Like, obviously in the early days, it would have been a pretty lonely kind of experience, I suppose, working this up, expanding it, growing it, and so on. How did you get through the kind of moments of doubt at any point in the journey? Who did you turn to speak to, Because me and Harry have got each other.
Definitely that coach was really an important person for me. She became more like a friend, really, once she'd kind of imparted a lot of her her knowledge. I mean, unfortunately, she passed away during COVID, not of COVID. She had a brain disease, and I've definitely missed sort of having that person. But luckily, she taught me enough to kind of do things by myself at that time, and also obviously my network had rapidly expanded. So I think maybe it's technology, but it has become a lot easier to kind of meet real friends in business now, isn't it? Like LinkedIn and things like that. There are people that I've met through there that have become really, really close colleagues. And I think joining industry groups as well. I joined a group called Black Belt Accountants. I left there when I was pregnant, actually, because you used to have to go to the conference in Derby, I think it was. So it's quite a long way for me to go. But I found it hugely powerful. It was a one-day conference every quarter, and just everyone having the similar sort of struggles. We've got this new regulation coming from HMRC. What are you doing about that? And I think people now are much more open to collaborate. They're not as, keep all your cards close to your chest, don't help anyone. They've realised that the benefit of adding value and putting content out there that helps other people is really useful. So yeah.
Cool. No, and I think it's easy to look back over everything and like I say, like really pick out the highlights. And we know like it's not always plain sailing. So for those things that you can talk about, could you give us a couple of examples of when it hasn't gone as planned?
Yeah, of course. I think there have been times that I've grown too fast. And then that's led us to let customers down because we overestimated our capabilities. Yeah, we can onboard all these 10 clients this month. And then actually, we've dropped balls and whatever and had to, be accountable for that. So I think it's hard because I think when you're in business and you're in that growth phase, you want to say yes to everything. Of course you do, and you need to some extent if you're increasing your overheads by getting premises and getting this and that on board and new staff members. But you have got to be quite careful to protect your reputation as well, and not let customer services slide because you're just chasing new work all the time. So I think that's one thing that's kind of happened along the road of the acquisitions I've done. 4 of them have been really, really successful. One was a real disaster. And basically it was the list of clients that I purchased was not the list of clients. So there were clients on that list that had left years previously. They'd overinflated the fees that those customers were paying. So that resulted in sort of a bit of a legal battle, which did settle out of court. We mediated and sorted it out, but it had an impact on the wider business because even though I didn't end up paying for the clients that I didn't get, I paid the amount that was owed. I ended up with a loss-making business that was having sort of putting real financial strain on my core business. So I had to sort of think fast and do a bit of a restructure. We sold off half that client base, moved the staff into another office to save costs there. But that was definitely a wobble because I sort of thought, maybe I'm pushing too much. Do I need to be doing this? Considering we get so much new clients through organic growth anyway, do you need to go down that acquisition route? But I think it's just a case of, it wasn't the last one I did. I've done 2 since. It was actually the 3rd one, and it didn't put me off. At the time, yes, it was a wobble, but I thought, but we dealt with it, and there was a way out of it. And it's the learnings, isn't it? I mean, what I learned about what they call warranties, which is the terms and conditions in the contract. So when you purchase a business, you put things in that go, we're not paying if XYZ happens, or this isn't what you say, or any of these things occur. And those worked. And paid off. And I learned a bit about structure, so sort of how to ring fence a deal to keep it separate from your main core business. More recently, I've had a bit of a challenge with some investors. So we had some investors in one of the practices we bought, which was really useful, having people on board for equity rather than borrowing, because that's how I'd done it before. I'd done it with money from Funding Circle and things like that. And that's a lot of pressure. I don't buy companies generally. I buy lists of clients. They call that goodwill purchase or assets purchase. And because of that, you don't have any money coming in on day one because you're not buying the limited company, so you don't own its debts. So you really don't start getting paid anything until you start doing work for clients, issuing bills. And in the meantime, you've got staff to pay for, premises to pay for, and then potentially this big loan as well. So having it where investors are on board and they're only going to make money if you make money it was to some extent easier. But what we found is a few years down the line, it became clear that we had quite different visions for the business. At the beginning, it was just a kind of, well, let's put some money in and see what happens. And then there became pressure to sort of join a wider group where I wasn't comfortable with the nature of the group that was being built, and what that looked like for us in terms of our ethics and our governing body rules about conflicts of interest and all this sort of stuff. And they wanted to outsource abroad, and that's never really been something that I've looked to do. I've never been involved in a business outsource. I'm not anti it. It's just I prefer to work with UK based teams where we can meet and build rapport, and not that that's impossible. It's just outside of my skill set. I think doing everything remotely, I quite like having, obviously we have the option to work from home, but I like having a team that's here and who knows the client inside out. Our service is very personable, very bespoke, so it's important that the advisors are not just a face and actually everything's being done somewhere else. They actually have done that work and know that business inside out. So just differences of opinion, really. But because of that, they sort of decided they wanted me out of the business, and then we had a battle around that about who was going to pay who off. But we are where we are now. It's we've kind of been through a legal process, and now I think it's likely that I'm probably going to buy them out because it makes sense for me to take the business forward. They've never really been involved in the day to day. It's been my sort of operation. So I've got the relationships with the staffs and the clients and all of that sort of side of things. So I think that's what makes sense, really. But again, the learnings on that about taking on investment, what that should look like, shareholders agreements, exit plan. If one or other party wants out, you have to put in their evaluation. Otherwise, it's just a blank check. Like, people are going, well, I'll go, but give me £1 million. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, well, I'm not giving you £1 million. But if there was a set mechanism to, this is how we value it, then that situation would have been a lot easier. So all you can ever do, I think, from mistakes is just take the learnings. And what I've found about all of those kind of issues that I've experienced is it's given me the confidence to put myself out there as a consultant. Okay. So obviously I'm running the business of Bells, but I'm pretty much in an ownership space now where I haven't got to involve myself too much in the day-to-day. So, and I missed being really hands-on with the clients. So I've kind of gone out there and set up a website of my own to help people who want to grow really rapidly, who want to do acquisitions, anyone really that needs a bit more than what a traditional accountant would provide. So, most accountants, in fairness, they're paid to do compliance. So there's, minimise your tax and here's your reports. But they might not have had a business journey of their own. They might have inherited that practice or worked their way up within it. So it would be hard for them to really help a business that's going through those transitions. Whereas for me, my consultancy work is based on my own experience, not necessarily my technical knowledge as an accountant, although it is very financial based, because that's obviously my background. I'm certainly not a coach. I'm very sort of directative and hands-on.
Okay. So, perfect segue to go into acquisitions then, which sounds like an area that you're very passionate about. Where do you even start? Talk us through the first one. So you said you've done 4 or 5 now. How do you start with the first one?
So the first one is, and probably always will be, the best deal I've ever done. It came to me via networking, friend of a friend, which is always a good way because there's no sort of brokerage fees or anything like that. So I had no intention of buying a business as usual, nothing really sort of planned and scheduled out. But this friend of a friend said, look, my friend's uncle is looking to sell his accountancy practice. He's tried to sell it a couple of times to some corporates, and he hasn't really liked their ethics. Like, they've wanted to move the staff out miles away, and they, didn't want to keep any of the clients that were under a certain level of fees. And obviously these clients had been his friends, over the years. Yeah. And this guy was, late 70s, and it does sort of become like that. You worked with the client for many years. So he just really wanted someone that was going to look after the staff and the clients in the same way that he had. So I thought, well, I don't really know anything about buying a practice, but I'll go along and have a chat with him. And obviously he didn't really know a lot about selling a practice because he'd not sold one either. So we just sort of figured our way out between us, and we sort of looked at the systems that we had in place and what the numbers might look like, and whether our prices were kind of similar, and our ways of doing things. And we thought, we could potentially have a deal here. And he had freehold property as well. So that's really helpful. If a business that you're looking to target has got an asset, then you can use that to leverage finance, which is really helpful. So he had this building that the company was present in, and we struck a deal for the whole thing, so for the freehold and for the business. And at some point along the way, when we were doing the paperwork and everything, he asked me, do you mind if I ask, have you got to borrow the money to do this deal? And I said, well, yeah, I've definitely not got £500,000 in my back pocket, so I will have to sort of go to a bank. And he said, well, look, I'd rather you borrow that money off me. He was like, I want it to succeed. I don't want you to be under sort of crazy amounts of pressure. He goes, I don't need a lump sum. I've got my house, I've got another property as well, a holiday home thing. He said, my worry is more losing my sort of monthly revenue. So what he put forward was for him to be paid off over 20 years. So it's a monthly payment, which effectively means the business pays for itself. And chances are, bless him, he might not be here by the time the payments are ended because of the age he was. But obviously then his family will benefit from that income after that. So, yeah, I mean, really, with that kind of offer on the table, it was an absolute no-brainer because I had nothing to lose. I had a building out of it. He secured his money against the building, which didn't cover all of it because obviously the money that I owed was actually the business and the building. But at least there was quite a substantial amount. He could put a charge over the building to protect most of it should anything go wrong. And we are, now 7 years into that deal. So only 13 years to go, and I'll be the proud owner of the practice.
With acquisitions, what would you say is one of the top skills that you need? In my mind, it's probably that kind of point where you're actually discussing the deal and kind of negotiating. I'm sure in the deals that you've done, at times the other parties come to you with their proposal and you're like, no, that's way too much. I'm out. And then it's kind of going there. Is that right? Or is there other things that you need to consider?
No, you're bang on, Brendan. I think people skills in everything, in acquisition, but also in business, the ability to deal with people is just huge, and build trust and build relationship, because there's huge trust with acquisition. There's trust on both sides. The buyer is trusting that the seller is being honest and giving all the information, and the seller is trusting you with their legacy and with the fact that likelihood is there's going to be some deferred payments, and are they going to pay the money when it's owed, and all of this sort of stuff. So it's really important. I always think if you're looking at acquisition in those early stages, it's a really good idea to listen a lot more than you talk. So listen to what they have to say, what an ideal deal looks like for them, because you'd be surprised at people's motivations. I think that there's an assumption that a seller is always motivated by getting the maximum possible price. But in my world, where owners, accountants tend to work for a year, a lot of them are late 70s, 80s before they decide they're going to let go. And it's because they don't know what they do without, you get stuck in that sort of Groundhog Day. But also that responsibility to those clients. I mean, the funny thing is with the staff as well, because obviously the staff are very important to them. There's a piece of regulation called 2P, which effectively when you buy a company, the staff 2P over to you. You might have heard that, but they transfer all their employment contract transfers to you. And it means that you have to honour the same years of service. So if you was to ever make them redundant, you'd have to pay them off for however long they've worked for the previous person. They have to get all the same benefits, so same hours, same pay, and all this sort of stuff. So it protects them. You can change things, but you've got to consult if you're going to do that. So it gives them a level of protection. And because of that 2P regulation, there are people that work for me now that have theoretically worked for me since before I was born because they've worked for the previous owners for 40 odd years. And you just think, that's crazy, isn't it? But yeah, that's the reality. You're taking on someone's legacy. You could only think of it in your own business. If you was passing that on to somebody, what would be important to you? And a lot of these business owners, they've already made their money. So it is a factor. Of course, it's a factor, but it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all. So you've really got to kind of listen and take their opinions and see if that's something that you think is a good fit. Culture's huge as well. Like, I think the only reason it wouldn't work is if you just can't merge the culture. Like, if they have a totally different mentality in terms of how they deal with their customers or how their staff are towards one another or how the business is run. That can be really, really difficult. So it's important to me to sort of meet the staff as well on a one-to-one, because they're a huge part of what I'm buying.
Fair. And how do you spot these opportunities for acquisition? Are they opportunities that come to you, or do you actively go out and seek them?
In every case with me, it's come to me, and I think that's because I was, lucky to fall upon that first one. And so then once you've got a track record, there's more trust there, so other owners will go, oh, you've done this before, that's great. And to the point that you see them visibly relax and go, right, you tell me what it looks like then. How do we do this? When do we notify the clients? When do I tell the staff? And you go, oh, well, normally, this is how it is. So I think that track record's important, which obviously isn't helpful to someone who's starting out. But I think the first step is just to put out there into your network that might be something you're looking to do. Again, LinkedIn's a really powerful tool. If you do any networking, if you know of other people in your industry, and it is your industry that you're looking for, I've had conversations with other accountants because there's plenty of business for everyone and we all do slightly different things. So for example, at Bells, we're not audit registered. So if the company sort of hits the 12 million mark, we need to employ an auditor or need to pass that client to someone who can do the audit. And so I will reach out to other accountants. There are ones who specialise in overseas tax. That's something we don't do as well. So I'll reach out to them on that basis and say, look, we might be able to collaborate here. We'd like to pass some work to you. And as part and parcel of that conversation, I'll also say, oh, and by the way, if you hear of anyone retiring, I'm always on the look to sort of expand and buy new business. So a lot of the time it's been someone who knows someone who knows someone who said to me, oh, by the way, there might be an opportunity here. And again, I think that helps to build trust because it doesn't feel as aggressive as, a broker's dealing with the broker's kind of trying to inflate the price with the seller and, telling the buyer whatever it takes to get it over the deal. And not that I'm anti-brokers, they absolutely have their place. It's never a bad idea to sort of register with a broker, but I've always found there's some advantage to kind of a bit more of an organic approach.
And we're coming very close to time now that we have of you. So a good question that we like to end things on is, done a lot over a long period of time. What is the one thing that stands out as the proudest moment?
Oh, that is a good question. I think you never forget your first acquisition. I think when that went through, that felt like a huge achievement. It was like, wow, look what we did. We bought a business. That's just amazing. But then I'd caveat with that 3 days in, you go, oh my God, what have I done? There's just so much work to do that you kind of flying on a high of doing the deal. And then you're like, oh God, okay, the hard work starts now. Now we've actually got to integrate everything. I've got to build a relationship with all these clients. So yeah, there's been so many. It's really hard to kind of pinpoint one. We had a 10-year anniversary, big barbecue thing. And one thing I struggle with is when I see everyone in the same place, because we're multi-site, in my head, we're still quite small because each of the practice I go to, I think the biggest one's about 12 people. But then times if we have a social or we have the Christmas do, it's one of those things, it's not good to look down. I suddenly go, oh my God, you look around at all these people and you think about their families and their kids and how much they're depending on you to not be a scatterbrain and not do something wrong and keep a grip on the finances and stuff. It's a bit scary, but at the same time, lovely that you've built this family in a way, all these people together.
Okay. I lied. Go on, Brendan. Go on, you go.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that as well. When you're standing in front of everyone that works for you, essentially, do you ever look back to where you were getting receipts in your Toyota and driving around and just think, oh wow, okay, yeah, this is amazing, this journey,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the time that it really hits me. I think most of the time you're so busy and so in the do, aren't you, that you just don't really have time to reflect. But when I look back, I think, what we earn now, my ambition in year one was to earn, to match my salary. I didn't manage it. I think I made 11 grand in year one, but it was huge to me. That was huge. And now, what I earn on a monthly basis, not what I personally earn, but what the business earns on a monthly basis, you just think, I'd never have believed that in a million years. But it does sort of happen, not accidentally, because obviously you're pushing it on, but when it happens quickly, it's like, oh God, it's a cool thing.
Yeah, amazing.
Cool. So I got asked this on a podcast that I did last week, actually, so I'm going to steal it, which is, so their ending was, is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to speak about that you wanted to speak about?
Oh, really good question as well. I'd like to just touch a little bit on women in business as well.
Okay.
If there's any women out there listening that really would like to take their business to the next level but are not sure how to do so, I'd love to hear from you, because people often ask me, do you, I suppose, oh, you work predominantly with women, because obviously it's a female-led firm, and unfortunately that's still not the case. I'd still say kind of 80% of my client base are male. There's 20% are female, but the business owners that I've come across or who are female tend to be a little bit more risk adverse. So whether it's just, historically that they felt that, because of family commitments or whatever, that maybe they wouldn't want to take that risk of getting a loan in order to expand the business or do something like an acquisition. But, if you are someone that's sort of in that position and consider it, all I'd want to say is that you absolutely can. I'm a single mum to my little girl, and it's tough. The balance is tough, but she sees every day, my drive to work. She understands why I work, that I want her to have these amazing experience. I want to take her to Disney. My end goal is to be the first sole female director to get into top 100 accountancy practices, which I believe I'll be, the only person who's done that in a lifetime, let alone the only woman, because normally they're like 8 partner firms and things like that. And a lot of my reasoning for doing that is her, because I want her to know that anything is possible for her, whether you're a man or a woman. So yeah, if you are a lady out there and you'd be interested in speaking about how to sort of really aggressively grow your business, then yeah, I'd love to have a chat.
How's the best way for them to find you if they do want to speak to you?
So LinkedIn, I'm always on LinkedIn. So obviously Joanne Bell, Bell's Accountant, you'll be able to find me on there. I do have my consultancy website, which is www.joannebell.co.uk. That's got sort of information about booking me as a speaker, but also working with me on a one-to-one basis. There's no criteria for working with me. You don't have to be, a big business now. There's options to just do like an hour, 2 hour Zoom, or kind of the ongoing mentoring side. Don't have to be an existing client of Bell's. And obviously, if you're interested in the accountancy side, just having, that little bit more proactive support from your accountant, we're www.bellsaccountants.co.uk.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again, Joe. It's been like I can't believe it's been 47 minutes we've been recording. So thank you for coming on the podcast, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.